Very soon. I'm hearing from a lot of people. Both ways. Both ways, believe me.
Are you leading the direction, sir?
I'm hearing from a lot of people both ways. Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
The president seems to be treating his decision on whether to pull out of the world's most significant climate agreement ever like an episode of The Apprentice. Yet administration officials with knowledge of the decision have told various news outlets the president has already made up his mind to do so. If that's the case, he'll have the support of 22 Republican senators, including Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who signed onto a letter to the president last week calling for the U.S. to withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement. And there are dueling contingents in the White House, reportedly, with EPA Chief Scott Pruitt and top strategist Steve Bannon arguing to leave, and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, former CEO of Exxon, one should note, and the president's daughter arguing to stay. The option to stay is also the position of these Fortune 500 companies that signed a letter that will appear in full-page ads tomorrow in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, urging the president not to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement. A few days ago, the chief executive of ExxonMobil, the current one, also wrote the president a letter arguing he should keep, quote, a seat at the negotiating table to ensure a level playing field. And then there's the entire rest of the world. The Paris Climate Accord has been agreed to by 193 countries, plus the EU and Palestinian Authority. If the U.S. does leave, we would join the two countries on the entire planet not in agreement with the accord. One is Syria, which is, well, in the middle of a brutal and ghastly civil war, and Nicaragua, which does not think the deal goes far enough. Now, the Paris climate deal is non-binding, meaning it's, for all intents and purposes, a voluntary collective effort to name targets and then hit them by the majority of the world's countries, the overwhelming majority, to try to curb the warming of the planet. If the president does pull out, it could have severe implications for the world and the U.S.'s role in it. According to the German ambassador, if the U.S. withdraws from the Paris Agreement, China may become the world's leader. Joining me now, Senator Ed Markey, Democrat from Massachusetts, member of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations and Committee on Environment and Public Works. Senator, what are the stakes here to you?
Well, the stakes are huge. If he says that he does not want to make a promise to the coal industry, that means he's going to have to break a promise which the United States made to the world, that we would be the leader. A promise that we should make to every subsequent generation of Americans throughout the 21st century, that we solved a problem that could cause catastrophic consequences, not just for the poorest countries in the world, but also for the United States itself. It's an economic, a national security, and a moral responsibility of the United States to be the leader. And what the president is doing is walking away from global leadership, and the consequences will be great in terms of how the rest of the world views us in terms of our ability to keep our word to a huge issue, which is at the core of what that entire planet wants the United States to be the leader.
So I want to zoom in here, because what I'm hearing from you is there's two possible consequences, right? The sort of catastrophic one, to my mind, would be that it would unravel the deal. Countries would start to pull out. Even though this is voluntary, the countries announce their targets for carbon emission reductions. They agree to audit and to publish them, so it's all public. But what I'm hearing from you and what I've heard from other people is that it's not going to make other countries pull out. The deal's going to hold whether the U.S. is in or not. Is that your sense?
Look, China has already announced that it is going to produce by 2030 as much renewable energy electricity as all of the electricity that is produced in the United States in 2017. Meaning that China, that India, that Germany has a plan. Their plan will be to brand made in China, made in Germany, the clean energy technologies, the all-electric vehicles that are going to be produced in 2030, and the United States is just going to be left in the rear view mirror of economic history. Clean energy sector, because the president wants to keep a promise to the coal industry that only has 70,000 jobs left, while today we already have 350,000 jobs in the wind and solar industries that for all intents and purposes didn't even exist 10 years ago.
You know, you're in the United States Senate, and the United States Senate is home to a large percentage of the people that don't like this deal. I mean, basically the entire world is signed on except for Syria and Nicaragua. But the 22 Republican senators wrote that letter. And Jonathan Chait wrote this, which I thought was interesting. Of all the major conservative parties in the Democratic world, the Republican Party stands alone in its denial of the legitimacy of climate science. Indeed, the Republican Party stands alone in its conviction that no national or international response to climate change is needed. Is that going to change anytime soon?
Well, the National Academies of Science of every country in the world has concluded that the planet is dangerously warming,
right,
that human beings are principally responsible, and that there is a moral responsibility and a technical capacity to deal with the problem.
Right, and the conservative parties of Germany and of England and of France and of Australia and of Italy all basically sign on to that, but not the conservative party, the center-right party of the United States. Why?
Because this conservative party in the United States is funded by the Koch brothers. It's funded by the coal industry. It insists that Scott Pruitt, the Attorney General of Oklahoma, that actually sued the EPA 19 times on clean air, clean water, soot, mercury issues, becomes the head of the EPA.
Wait, but let me ask you this, Senator. But wait a second. Because, look, the fossil fuel industry, ExxonMobil, wrote a letter to the president telling him to stay into Paris. So at a certain point, the explanatory framework that it's basically doing the bidding as a front for the fossil fuel companies almost gets stretched beyond belief if some of the fossil fuel companies themselves want them to stay in the deal.
Well, some of them may. But the coal industry does not. And that's why Mitch McConnell's name is at the top of that letter. And so this is really a campaign promise he made. But that campaign promise is going to undermine American leadership. And moreover, it's going to undermine our national security. Part of our plan is to increase fuel economy standards to 54.5 miles per gallon by the year 2025 to move to all-electric vehicles. Well, that's going to back out a lot of oil, which we now import from Saudi Arabia, oil that we import from the Middle East. So the president was just over there last week and dancing around, and the Saudis are very happy because that's one country that is definitely hypocritical about this whole climate change issue. They want to be selling more oil in the years ahead. And the United States instead is going to be sending over young men and women in uniform to protect the tanker ships coming to our country from Saudi Arabia and other countries, when we should be telling them that we, with a climate plan, with a clean energy plan, with an all-electric vehicle plan, are going to back out all of those issues that compromise our national security, compromise our ability to step back and be neutral in terms of our attempts to bring peace to the Middle East.
All right.